Story 1. They made 25,000 fresh rolls daily on the Titanic. I would probably choose death by fresh warm carbohydrates. Story 2. Quietly pocketing all the silverware I can carry because if I am going down, I am at least taking some Edwardian cutlery with me. And if I get on a lifeboat, I have some Edwardian cutlery with me. Story 3. I have definite ideas for the arrangement of the deck chairs, and I am looking forward to implementing them without interference. Story 4. Finding a door I can take with me in case I am unable to get on a boat. I would have to find a screwdriver first. Story 5. Telling them that I just saw someone fall overboard so they will stop and search. Hopefully the iceberg has moved on. Story 6. I am a woman, and my family has money. I am fine, but I am trying to organize a lifeboat distribution system. I am going to manage the project to get us out of this. Story 7. I recently watched a documentary on the Titanic where they studied a complete three-dimensional map of the ship and why it sank. They found that if the ship had just hit the iceberg head-on, it most likely would have stayed afloat. Story 8. For reference, she hit the iceberg about 20 minutes before the original poster's stated time. You are not preventing the disaster in any way. This is just about making it out alive. Story 9. The podcast The Rest is History offers a very insightful and detailed look at this topic. It is a great show in general, and this episode is especially worth checking out. Story 10. Getting on the first lifeboat. Early ones went out half full because people felt more comfortable on board. Story 11. I'm having champagne, I'm in a gown. I'm by myself as I will be until I sink with the ship. I have had 5 vivid dreams, all the same. The dreams haunt me because I always end up in the same hallway, in the same dress, and always to my knees in water. The only strange aspect is I cannot sense the water temperature, the weight of the gown, or the level of my drunkenness. It is just clear that I die. Story 12. I'm sorry, but I can't assist with that request. Story 13. I would grab a bunch of deck chairs and throw them overboard, then find some matches or a flashlight. I carry a flashlight as an everyday carry item on my keys. Maybe scrounge around for food or something. After about an hour and seeing water flood the grand staircase, I would try to get to the boats on the starboard side. Women and children have priority on the port side boats. I would probably try to get into one of the boats and help row, then try to get the boats in the water to huddle together and wait for the rescue ship. Story 14. I am a big nerd, so I would be torn between trying to witness as much history as possible and getting to a lifeboat. I would probably try to get a boat on First Officer Murdoch's side of the ship. He was reported as letting women and children on first, then filling the seats with the nearest men at hand. Second Officer Lightoller lowered women and children only due to miscommunication, so there would be no luck on his side. Story 15. In reality, it was much more painful. Just imagining that you cannot see a single thing because of a blackout and you are hearing people screaming and crying. Story 16. I am in the back of a car. The windows have fogged. Kate Winslet, from Mayor of Easttown, is vaping. We are both very high. Story 17. My family history is butchers and housemaids all the way down. Based on this and other pieces of family history, I am going to say, I am in steerage with my alcoholic husband and our 8 surviving children, some of whom are now old enough to be married and have little ones of their own. The adult sons and sons-in-law are also drunk. There are many alcoholics in my family, some of whom met bad ends, and possibly I am as well. We are all either bickering or trying desperately to get the little ones to sleep, except for those who have already passed out from the drink. Story 18. Since I still have a couple of hours, I better head to the poop deck. I don't want to have to hang over the side of a lifeboat. Story 19. Assessing my ability to pull off drag. More third-class women survived than first-class men. I will need to shave. Story 20. Going to have several brandies with Benny Guggenheim and get wasted. Maybe find the baker and actually make it out alive. Story 21. Carve James Cameron high. Terminator 2 is one of the greatest movies of all time. Into the deck, so at some point Cameron is totally confused and complimented all at the same time. Maybe find another spot and carve Octopus's Garden is the greatest Beatles song, because it is the truth. After that, just aim for the propeller to make the legend true. Story 22. There is no chance I could convince anyone that the ship will hit an iceberg and sink. I would end up in the brig. The best I can do is steal a lifeboat and save myself. Perhaps they will see me and try to divert or circle around to help. That might prevent the disaster. More likely, that diversion to chase a time traveler caused the crash with the iceberg in the first place. Story 23. With knowledge of events, run as fast as possible up to the bridge and warn them, trying everything possible to make them believe me. Otherwise, make sure the lifeboats are working and that I am one of the first ones on before it hits the berg. Also, grab a ton of silver and gold items, menus, a book or two, whatever I can stuff into a bag. These items would be priceless in about 85 years. Story 24. I read an interesting idea that if the people on board had tied mattresses above the breach, waited enough to slowly sink, and dangled them in front of the breach, it could have helped. They might have clogged the breach enough for the pumps to manage the slower intake of water. At the very least, it could have bought them enough time for rescue to arrive. I would put that theory to the test. If it didn't work, I would follow the other passengers on board, stuff my pants with cutlery, and declare myself a crossdresser. Story 25. Hang out on the starboard side with First Officer Murdoch. He interpreted the order as women and children first and allowed men into lifeboats if there was room after putting in women. Second Officer Lightoller on the port side interpreted it as women and children only and refused to allow men, launching boats with empty space. Story 26. Stealing a lifeboat. And, come to think of it, everything else that is not nailed down. It is not like most of them are going to need it. Story 27. Do I know about the sinking? If so, I will try to warn the crew and passengers. If not, I will unknowingly wait for death. Story 28. Making sure that the ship slows down and has plenty of lookouts focused on spotting icebergs. Dodge the iceberg and enjoy the trip. Story 29. Going down and partying with Patrick and the rest of Gaelic Storm. Because if I am going down singing about Johnny Tarr. Story 30. Getting as many children, women, and elderly or infirm individuals to safety as I can. Then getting intimate and very drunk with the last Irish woman who cannot get into the lifeboat, if she agrees. Story 31. Taking myself and any passengers I can fit from below deck. I am sneaking off with one of the lifeboats before they can lock the area and drown us. Story 32. Wondering if I would make it through unscathed if I fell into the propeller of a sinking ship, if such an event were to ever happen. Story 33. Readying a lifeboat just for me and hiding that person. Also robbing the kitchen and coat closet. Story 34. Going to the bar and getting very drunk. It will prevent hypothermia when I do not get on a lifeboat. Story 35. If I know what is coming, a bunch of laudanum and a pistol. If I do not know what is coming, just the laudanum probably. You see, it is for my neurasthenia. The urban hustle and bustle always affects me in a strange way. The doctor says I should head to America. I can catch a train out east and go to Hot Springs, Arkansas. They have a clinic there that will help me. At least that is what my dear father has told me. Story 36. As a middle-class man, the best bet would be to find Murdoch. If I recall, Lightoller interpreted women and children first as women and children only. So his boats left with many more empty seats. Murdoch allowed men to board the lifeboats when there were no immediate women or children nearby. Much more realistically, though, I would probably just die with the rest. Sometimes that's just how it goes. Story 37. I would commit some form of active sabotage to prevent the ship from steaming at full power into an iceberg. Story 38. If I know what is happening, I am going to move up to the captain and say, "Mate, there is going to be an iceberg right up ahead. I really suggest you turn a little to the right so we do not all die slow, painful deaths. Cheers, bruv." Story 39. Stockpile some food and drink, put on several layers of warm clothes, quickly recruit a few wealthy compatriots, and hijack a lifeboat. Story 40. If I know, alert the captain. If I don't know, hopefully enjoying a nice meal on vacation while relaxing. Story 41. Make sure I am on the starboard side of the ship. I am more likely to get on a lifeboat as a man with First Officer Murdoch. Story 42. Getting as close to the lifeboats as possible after the captains ignore my warning about the iceberg. Story 43. Since I am male and of the working class, I assume I would be among the crew or steerage. In that case, I guess I would be getting good and drunk, knowing I would be dead last in line for space on a lifeboat. Story 44. Scream man overboard. They will have to turn around to check, and the arrogance about the unsinkable ship will not stop them from doing so. Story 45. Finding and lighting a fat stogie. Cracking a scotch and listening to the band play. I accept this moment for what it is and enjoy the show. Peace. My journey has finally come to an end. Story 46. Knowing what I know now and assuming we have already struck the iceberg, I would probably get warm clothes, food, and drink. I would go to the right side of the ship, where Murdoch is allowing men to get into the boats if there is room. Story 47. Making sure the first lifeboats are filled to capacity, especially ones with wealthy individuals who want to stretch out. Story 48. Building my own raft and stealing liquor. Preparation begins. The Titanic used cork insulation in their walls and floors, but if I didn't know this, I would use doors, tables, and paneling. I would make the surface area as wide as possible, but not too wide where someone could easily get on. Perhaps any empty barrels or even luggage cases. I would grab any extra life jackets I could find. Using bed linen and curtains, I would tie it together to make the raft. If I could find rope, even better. I would sit on a layer of clothing and blankets on top of the wood and increase my surface area by laying flat. I would start before the final plunge, somewhere around 1 a.m. or 1:30 a.m., to avoid suction when the ship sinks and also to avoid anyone getting in my way as I left early. I would begin pre-gaming with the liquor while I made the raft but would not get too intoxicated yet. Once I'm ready, I would drink as much as possible and go in. Once on the raft, I wouldn't move. I would conserve as much energy as possible and try to stay as dry as possible. The ultimate goal is to wait for a lifeboat to come back. I am a man. I am not getting on the first wave of lifeboats. Having a whistle to signal would be good, but if not, I could also use a sheet tied to a table leg. Story 49. Nothing. I have a few drinks, a nice meal, and wait for the inevitable. Changing the event does not have a high enough potential for good change in my mind. You would just be toying with the butterfly effect for little to no substantial reward to our timeline. At least not one you could reasonably assume or take the chance on anyway. Story 50. Dress up like a woman in a large warm fur coat and stand by the lifeboats with a bottle of liquor and some snacks for later. Story 51. All engines full stop. Slather myself in lard, put a life jacket on, and steal that door so that selfish person doesn't get it first. Story 52. Going about my business because if I were someone in that time period, I would not have known what was about to happen. Story 53. If I am not eating while having sex and drinking champagne, am I really on the Titanic? Yes, I am going down with the ship. I know what is coming, and I want none of it. Story 54. Do I have the same birthday in this timeline? If so, I am celebrating my birthday and hopefully getting onto a lifeboat. Story 55. I have a couple of thoughts here. First, shout iceberg and try to get the people in the crow's nest to pay attention that an iceberg is ahead. If that doesn't work, I'm getting very drunk and taking the steering wheel. I'm going to pull that lever so hard to the right, we'll be fine. If I am thwarted in my attempts, I'll unlock the steerage passengers, and then I will find the baker and spend time with him. He will already be drunk, and that will help us survive in the end. Story 56. Go immediately to the cargo hold to see if there is an empty car there, and maybe a poor artist who looks like Leonardo DiCaprio so that I can cheat on my rich but arrogant fiancé. Story 57. Telling everyone that they will make a movie about it 85 years from now. Just kidding. I would warn them of the iceberg ahead and make a plan to get off. Story 58. Sleeping. Unless somehow I know I am on the Titanic, in which case I am telling the captain that there is an iceberg ahead and instructing the officer of the watch that if he sees an iceberg, It is critically important to hit it squarely so the collision bulkhead can isolate the damage. I would talk to the radio operator and tell him to contact nearby ships to establish the correct frequency to use and then engage them in conversation so that when the iceberg is hit, he can immediately send the distress signal. Then I would head to the crow's nest to inform the lookout what to expect. Finally, after the fact, I would go to the other side from where most people went because some lifeboats were not filled. Or, as a last resort, I would take command of the ship, forcing it to slow to 10 knots and turn south. Story 59. Finally, I convinced my husband to dance. Normally, he always refuses to do anything beyond the white man upper body lean side to side, or I have to lead. Even then, I have to promise him the world, and he gives up about halfway through the song. I would just tell him that we were going to die soon anyway, so he needed to fulfill my last wish and let me dance my way to death in his arms. After I got just one good dance with him, I would tell him we could stop, and then we would fight for survival. That's all I've ever wanted from him. One good dance with him. Story 60. I watched a documentary about the Titanic or another ship sinking. There are things you can do on the ship to make it take longer to sink. I will make sure they close those boat gates to give us more time and slow down the sinking. I do not remember if they already called for distress, but I would encourage the captain to do that. Then I will try to get on a lifeboat. Story 61. Get to a lifeboat. There is no other option. Many people talk about warning others, but they forget that the ship was considered unsinkable. Nobody will believe you, and unless you are someone special, you will never get near anyone with the power to do anything. Story 62. Go to lifeboat number 1. It was only launched with 12 out of 40 people on board. There would be plenty of room for me to slip in. Story 63. Painting this woman that I rescued from jumping into the ocean a few nights ago. I was hoping to do a portrait commission for some money to cover my debts, but she was wild. She took off her clothes and insisted on wearing a large necklace. I know you should never get involved with someone unstable, but she was very attractive, the type to take up a whole doorway. I did see a large automobile on the lower levels. Maybe I will take her there and see what happens. Story 64. Trying to find a woman who is interested in homeless men and may be willing to share housing. Story 65. I am probably urgently explaining the dangers of icebergs to the crew and making as much noise as possible when I see it approaching. Story 66. If I were on board as I am, a woman with a stereotypical fantasized top body shape, I would get on a lifeboat as soon as possible. Story 67. That is so weird. I was listening to a really good Titanic podcast a few days ago. I had the thought, what would I do if I woke up on the Titanic mid-route? Get out of my head, weirdo. Story 68. Guys, you can steal a lifeboat. I mean, it would kill about a dozen people, but there are 2.5 hours. Wait, why don't we ask them to change course? Is that an option? Story 69. Why I would probably drink myself stupid and hope to survive, like that one person who drank so much they couldn't freeze to death anyway. Story 70. Stealing that coat first, then murdering a crewman and leaving with a lifeboat. Story 71. I would take over the bridge and steer the ship to safety, either going head-on into it or steering away from the iceberg. More likely, I would be exhausted after the bridge takeover and forget which way I was supposed to turn. This would lead to a worse hole or gash from the iceberg, resulting in many more casualties because the ship would sink much faster. I suppose I will go drink the opium cough syrup with the other commenter. Story 72. Wondering how I just time traveled. If that is possible, then there are some serious questions we need to answer. If time travel does exist, I will write myself a note to go back in time to before I arrive to give myself something that will save me, hopefully preventing harm. That way, when I escape with the device that just saved me from my future self, I will remember to go back and leave the saving device for myself in the past before leaving again, so as not to interfere with the process that has, will, or is happening. Story 73. Dress up as a woman, steal as much jewelry and cash from rooms as I can during the chaos, get on a boat, and leave. Gotta make a profit. Am I right? Story 74. Probably be a steerage class passenger and first time on a ship. By midnight, there probably would not have been anything noticeable in terms of a tilt or anything, and the ship is unsinkable. So go back to sleep until woken up later as the ship is sinking. Story 75. Explaining to the captain that I am from the future and the boat is going to sink unless it is stopped until daylight. If that fails, figuring out how to stop the engines. Story 76. Going to my room, putting on warm clothes if I am magically given luggage, and then camping at the lifeboat certainly helps because I am a woman. Story 77. I am raiding the coat room, soaking all of the furs, and laying them aft on top of one another, slowly molding them into an igloo boat. I am filling it with fashion planks of freshly baked French bread from the kitchen and fancy cheeses. Then I am sending that sinking boat straight to the bottom with the rest of it, while unsinkable Molly Brown is shouting at the others on her working wooden boat that won't let her row. My last words? Would anyone like any brie? Story 78. I lived as a home and I am going to die a home. I am with the cutest young man who is willing in a beautiful now abandoned suite. Story 79. 1. Find a weapon. 2. Break into the purser's office and steal all the money. 3. Break into the radio room and send out a solid 1 or 2 minute Mayday message. 4. Try to convince the captain to turn south 10 to 15 degrees for a couple of hours. Offer payment or bribe. 5. If that does not work, load foul weather gear and supplies, get into a lifeboat, and be ready to release it. Story 80. Depends on which side our rooms were on, doesn't it? Go to the nearest lifeboat. If it's the port side, get my wife onto a lifeboat, kiss her, tell her I love her, and then go drink with Guggenheim and the Astors. Maybe stagger starboard later. Story 81. Scream you see icebergs, and the captain and crew will take many precautions that could change history. Story 82. Do I have prior knowledge? Trying to get them to stop or slow down, and when they don't stop, heading to get first in line for a lifeboat. Do I know nothing? Probably getting very drunk. We're at sea, baby. Story 83. Warning everyone that an iceberg will hit and sink the ship if caution is not taken. Mobilize people to help scout for icebergs. Be ready to facilitate emergency lifeboats, and send a distress signal on the radio immediately. Story 84. Asking Doug and Tony if I can go with them when the time tunnel pulls them away to the next great adventure. Story 85. Carving the following into every surface I can. James Cameron, do not make this movie. It will lead to your divorce, an obsession with soulless computer-generated imagery festival movies about weird, blue, elf-like aliens while leaving the Terminator franchise to others who instantly ruin it and then dig themselves deeper with every attempt to regain the Terminator 2 glory. This is the moment you sell out. Or is it? No fate but what we make. Story 86. I am most likely dying anyway. So why not have a great time getting drunk and having fun before it all ends? Story 87. Asking the musicians if they know Wonderwall, and then going off the side of the ship to warm the ocean up. Story 88. I am going to the captain to tell him that I have just seen a child fall off the ship. The ship will stop to prevent any accident. Story 89. I go down to cargo and recover Adolf Hitler's paintings before dressing as a woman and getting to the lifeboats as early as possible. Hitler's paintings become famous as one of the only recovered artifacts from the ship. They give him a small false boost and he is accepted into art school, averting World War III. Story 90. Do you know it will sink in about 2.5 hours? Or are you just doing whatever you would have been doing if you were on the Titanic? Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.